My boys, you're so happy today. Yes, we always have fun with you. You're the best. What's going on here, sir? It's a surprise. I can't believe it. The millionaire arrived home by surprise, and what the cleaner was doing with his sons left him in shock. Fire her today, or I swear this house will never be yours again. Edward Sterling froze in the doorway of his own mansion, hearing that phrase escape his sister's lips. But what his eyes saw a second later stole the air from his lungs. He had just returned from Tokyo 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The deal with the Asian investors had closed in record time, and for the first time in nearly a year, Edward had felt the almost forgotten urge to come home early. He had asked the chauffeur not to announce his arrival. He wanted to surprise his sons. He wanted, though it was hard to admit even to himself, to reclaim something he had lost. The drive from the airport felt endless. The streets of New York City blurred outside the car window, while he, in his perfectly pressed suit and still tight tie after 14 hours of flight, mentally reviewed all the things he hadn't said to Matthew and Daniel in too long. His twin sons, 18 years old and, for the past 14 months, both in wheelchairs. The accident. Edward closed his eyes for an instant. He still couldn't think about that night without his chest tightening into a fist, the wet road, the sports car he himself had given them for their 18th birthday. The curve taken too fast. The hospital call at 3 a.m. that split his life in two, a before and an after. His sons survived, but something in them, and in him, had died that night. Since then, Edward had retreated into the only thing he knew how to do: work. Endless trips, late-night meetings, multi-million-dollar contracts, anything to avoid being in that enormous, silent house where his sons looked at him with a reproach they never voiced aloud. Anything to avoid facing the guilt that devoured him from within. He had hired the best doctors, the most expensive therapists, full-time nurses. He had filled the mansion with professionals and money, but he hadn't embraced his sons again. He didn't know how. Not after being the one who gave them the car, not after the words Matthew screamed at him from his hospital bed. "You did this to us." The car finally drove through the large wrought-iron gates of the estate. Sterling Manor stood imposing at the end of the cobblestone drive, surrounded by immaculate gardens and marble fountains. 3 floors of absolute luxury, and yet, for Edward, the coldest place in the world. "Wait here," he told the chauffeur. "I won't be long." He ascended the entrance steps with his small carry-on bag. He put the key in the lock with a nervous smile, rehearsing in his head the surprise he had been imagining for weeks. But before opening, he heard voices, and then everything changed. The first voice was his sister Valerie's, unmistakable, sharp as a knife, laden with that elegant disdain she knew how to wield as a weapon. "I'm warning you, Martha. That girl is not to be trusted. Where did she come from? Who really recommended her? My brother is too busy to notice, but I'm not so foolish. A nobody getting deeply embedded in this family. That only ends one way." The second, more trembling voice belonged to the housekeeper. "Martha, Mrs. Sterling, I'm just saying the boys are different since she arrived. Happier." More Valerie's laugh was like broken glass. "And who pays you, Martha? That cleaner or my family? Fire her today, or I swear this house will never be yours again." Edward frowned. A cleaner? What on earth was his sister talking about? He barely knew half the staff. He vaguely remembered authorizing the hiring of a new cleaning employee months ago. A quick signature among 100 documents. Nothing more. He pushed the door open slowly, without a sound, driven by a curiosity he couldn't quite understand, and what he saw in the main living room left him rooted to the floor. There, in the middle of the enormous, high-ceilinged living room with windows letting in the golden afternoon light, a young woman knelt on the rug. She wore a simple light blue cleaning uniform, with a white apron and yellow gloves she still had on. She couldn't have been more than 24. Her brown hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and from her face, sweaty from effort, bloomed the most radiant smile Edward had seen in years. But it wasn't her that stole his breath. It was his sons, Matthew and Daniel, his twins, the same boys who for 14 months had remained locked in a gloomy silence, who rejected visitors, who barely ate, who looked at everyone with resentment. They were laughing, truly laughing, roaring with laughter, their arms raised, propelling their wheelchairs toward the young woman like 2 children running to their mother. Their cheeks were flushed, their eyes bright, and from their mouths came laughter that Edward believed lost forever. "Lucy, I won. I got here first," Daniel shouted. "Liar, you cheated," Matthew replied, laughing, chasing him with his chair, and the young Lucy, so that was her name, opened her arms to receive them both, laughing with them, pretending they ran her over, falling backward onto the rug theatrically. While the twins celebrated their victory, as if they had won a world championship. Edward couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He had spent over a year paying the country's best specialists to make his son smile again. He had spent fortunes on psychologists, imported therapies, expensive equipment, and nothing had worked. And now, a cleaner in yellow gloves had achieved it in 3 months. A hand rested on his own chest without him willing it, as if he needed to confirm his heart was still beating. He felt his eyes well up and blinked hard, ashamed, not understanding why that scene hurt him so much, and at the same time filled him with something he couldn't name. "You again, Daniel," Lucy said, sitting up and shaking out her apron. All right, you won, but now it's time for me to collect my prize." "What prize?" Matthew asked, narrowing his eyes with playful suspicion. "The Champion Cleaner's Prize," she declared with feigned solemnity. "You both are going to do those leg exercises you hate so much. 10 minutes, no complaints." A chorus of protests erupted in the living room. "That's not fair. That's cheating. Rules are rules," Lucy laughed. "And a deal is a deal. Or do Sterling men not keep their word?" That was enough. The twins, their pride stung, surrendered amid theatrical complaints and began to get ready for their exercises. Edward watched in astonishment as Lucy knelt in front of Daniel and, with infinite delicacy, took his leg to help him stretch it. She spoke softly, patiently, encouraging him whenever he managed a minimal movement. "See? Today you reached further than yesterday. I told you. Your body still listens to you, Daniel. You just need to be patient. Do you think someday?" The boy's voice broke a little. "Someday I'll be able to walk?" Lucy didn't lie to him, didn't promise miracles, but looked him in the eyes with a sweet firmness Edward would never have known how to offer. "I think your job isn't to walk tomorrow. Your job is not to give up today. And you're already doing that. That already makes you braver than most people who can get out of bed." The boy nodded, moved, and continued to push himself. Edward felt his legs tremble. How many conversations like that had he missed? How many afternoons? How many laughs? While he was signing contracts on the other side of the world, a stranger had been doing the most important work of all, giving hope back to his sons. It was then that a voice cut the air behind him. "Edward!" It was Valerie. She had spotted him in the doorway. Her face shifted from surprise to calculation in a fraction of a second, and she immediately composed a worried, almost maternal expression. "Brother, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you." She approached with open arms, but her eyes darted to Lucy with a flash of alarm. "It's good you arrived. We were just talking about household matters, things we need to resolve." Urgently, in the living room, the atmosphere changed abruptly. The twins turned their heads toward the door. Lucy looked up, and seeing the man in the black suit in the doorway, her smile slowly faded. She stood up hastily, awkwardly removed her yellow gloves, and lowered her head. "Mr. Sterling," she murmured. "Excuse me, I didn't know we weren't expecting you, sir." But the twins didn't share her nervousness. "On the contrary, Dad," Matthew said, and for the first time in 14 months, there was no resentment in his voice, only shy astonishment. "You're back." Edward opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. His sister took his arm, whispering something in his ear about the girl, about rumors, about the need to speak alone as soon as possible. Valerie's voice was an insistent buzz. Lucy's smile had completely vanished, and his sons looked at him, waiting. For the first time in a long time, Edward Sterling, the man who controlled empires with a phone call, had no idea what to do. He only knew one thing, with a certainty that arose from deep in his chest. What he had just witnessed in that room was going to change everything, and he would not allow his sister to destroy it. "Let go, Valerie," he finally said in a low voice that chilled the air. "We have a lot to talk about, but not what you think." 3 months earlier, Lucy Miller had first crossed those wrought iron gates, her heart pounding, and her last $100 in her pocket. She had no idea she was about to enter the house that would change her life. She only knew she desperately needed the job, that her rent for her room in the apartment complex was 2 months overdue, and that this interview was probably her last chance before having to return home defeated. The housekeeper, Martha, had received her with crossed arms and the look of someone who had seen too many girls come through that door. "Experience. I cleaned large houses in the Midwest, ma'am. I have letters of recommendation." Lucy handed her a crumpled envelope with trembling hands. "Hard worker. I'm not afraid of effort." Martha reviewed the papers without much interest. But something about that girl with green eyes, strange, jade-colored eyes that seemed to carry more history than her age suggested, made her hesitate. "I'll be honest with you," she finally said. "This isn't an easy house. There are complications. The master's sons had an accident over a year ago. Both ended up in wheelchairs. And since then, Martha lowered her voice. Let's just say no employee lasts long. The boys are difficult, the master is rarely here, and some say this house is cursed by sadness. Lucy didn't flinch. On the contrary, something in her gaze softened. Sadness isn't a curse, ma'am. It's a wound, and wounds heal if someone has the patience not to give up. Martha looked at her for a long time. Perhaps it was that phrase. Perhaps it was the weariness of looking for employees who fled in the first week. Or perhaps, without knowing it, she sensed that this girl was different. You start Monday, cleaning, nothing else. Don't interfere with the boys. They have their nurses and doctors. Your job is the dust and the floors. Understood? Understood, ma'am. But life sometimes has other plans. The first encounter with the twins happened by accident on the third day. Lucy was cleaning the library when she heard a crash in the hallway, followed by a muffled curse. She ran and found Matthew on the floor next to his overturned wheelchair. He had tried to reach a book from a high shelf and lost his balance. "Don't touch me," the boy yelled when she approached. "I don't need your help. Get lost." Any other employee would have obeyed and fled. Lucy didn't. She sat on the floor beside him without touching him. She simply sat as if she had all the time in the world. "You're right," she said calmly. "You don't need my help. You're perfectly capable of getting back in your chair alone. I'm just going to sit here for a bit because I'm tired of cleaning. Does that bother you?" Matthew looked at her, bewildered. He was used to pity, to hands that lifted him without asking, to the looks of sorrow he hated so much. But that girl didn't look at him with pity. She looked at him as an equal. "What book did you want?" she asked after a silence. "The red one, on top." Lucy stood, reached for the book, and placed it on his lap. Then she extended her hand, not to lift him, but to offer a point of support. "If you want, I'll pull from here while you push, but you do the pushing, I just balance." And so, between the two of them, Matthew returned to his chair by himself, according to him, with a little help, according to the truth. But for the first time in 14 months, someone had allowed him to feel capable. That night, Matthew told Daniel about the strange cleaner who sat on the floor and didn't show pity. Daniel, the more bitter of the two, didn't want to believe him. "They all have pity," he said. "They just hide it better." But curiosity got the better of him. The next day, Daniel looked for an excuse to run into Lucy, and then another, and another, until excuses were no longer necessary. Lucy soon discovered the secret of those boys. They weren't sad because they couldn't walk. They were sad because they felt no one cared about them anymore. Their father avoided them. The nurses treated them like patients, not people. And the whole world seemed to have reduced them to 2 wheelchairs with a Millionaire surname. So Lucy did the only thing she knew how to do. She treated them like people. She invented games, wheelchair races down the marble hallways with absurd rules and ridiculous prizes. She turned the hated physiotherapy exercises into challenges and bets. She read to them aloud when they couldn't sleep. She asked them what they wanted to be before the accident, what they dreamed, what made them laugh. She slowly gave them back the feeling of being alive. And meanwhile, she did her job. She meticulously cleaned every corner of the mansion, without neglecting a single task. Because Lucy knew something life had taught her the hard way, that the poor cannot afford the luxury of being irresponsible, and that any misstep would be held against her. What no one knew was where that early wisdom came from. What no one knew was the weight Lucy carried in silence, because Lucy Miller had also lost. And a lot. Sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she would stop by the kitchen window and place her hand on her belly with an ancient, painful gesture, full of a sorrow she shared with no one. Then she would take a deep breath, wipe her eyes with the back of her yellow glove, and return to work. Life had hit her too soon for her to allow herself to crumble. But that story, hers, was not yet time to tell. The truth was that in that cold, enormous mansion, 2 broken boys and a broken cleaner had found each other, and together, without intending to, they began to heal. Martha noticed it. Of course she noticed. She saw how the twins began to eat again, how they asked for their favorite dessert, how they combed their hair in the mornings and asked what game Lucy would play that day. She saw how the house, after 14 months of mourning, began to fill with laughter again. And in the depths of her heart, hardened by the years, Martha was glad. But not everyone shared that joy. Valerie Sterling, Edward's sister, visited the mansion frequently, officially to see her nephews, in reality to monitor her investment, because Valerie had been calculating for years with a bookkeeper's coldness how much she would inherit when the time came. Her brother was a widower. Her nephews, 2 disabled young men who, according to the most pessimistic forecasts she herself encouraged, would hardly form their own families. And that meant that sooner or later the sterling fortune would end up in her hands, hers, and especially those of her son Franklin, a spoiled young man she saw as the true heir to the empire. But then Lucy appeared, and Valerie, who had a sharp instinct for detecting threats, immediately knew that this green-eyed girl was dangerous, not for what she did, but for what she provoked, because Valerie had seen something Lucy didn't yet know, and that Edward had not yet discovered. She had seen how the twins, for the first time, had a reason to want to get well. She had seen how the house came back to life, and she had seen, above all, the risk that this stranger would gain a place in the heart of the family she coveted for herself. "A cleaner," Valerie muttered one afternoon, observing from a distance how Lucy made her nephews laugh. "A nobody getting involved where she's not wanted. That will happen over my dead body." And she began to weave her web. First, there were loose comments to Martha. "Don't you think it's strange for an employee to get so attached to the boys? What is she really after?" Then darker insinuations. "I've heard things about that girl, about her past ugly things, Martha." Lies sown with the patience of someone who knows that a constant drip eventually wears away stone. Martha, loyal to the family and fearful of Valerie, began to doubt, and doubt, that poisonous seed began to grow. Lucy knew nothing of all this. She continued to arrive every morning in her blue uniform and yellow gloves, ready to clean the house and incidentally mend 2 broken hearts. She didn't know that her happiness, the modest happiness of feeling useful, of being loved by those boys, hung by a thread. She didn't know that while she taught Daniel to stretch his legs and Matthew to laugh again, a powerful woman conspired in the shadows to destroy her. And she didn't know, above all, that that very afternoon the twins' father would return without warning, cross the threshold of the mansion, and find her kneeling in the living room with open arms, embracing his sons in laughter. That encounter, that instant in which Edward Sterling's eyes first fell upon her, would be the beginning of everything. The love that would heal an entire family, and the war that was about to erupt. That night, Edward Sterling couldn't sleep. He dismissed his sister with a curt excuse. "We'll talk tomorrow, Valerie. I'm exhausted from the trip." And he locked himself in his study with a glass of whiskey he didn't even taste. The image wouldn't leave him. His sons laughing, their arms raised, their wheelchairs moving toward that girl in yellow gloves, as if she were the sun around which their lives had begun to revolve again. 14 months locked in guilt, buying specialists like one buys patches for a wound that won't heal, and a cleaner had achieved it without asking for anything in return. The next morning, instead of leaving for the office as he did every day, Edward did something he hadn't done since the accident. He stayed home, but he didn't make his presence known. He simply observed from a distance, like a stranger in his own home, and what he saw over the following days broke his soul and rebuilt it at the same time. He saw Lucy wake his sons with a ridiculous song she invented on the spot, changing the lyrics every morning until she made them laugh before they even opened their eyes. He saw how she turned breakfast into a competition. Who finished their fruit first? Who told the best joke? Who dared to try the green juice she swore tasted like grass but made them strong? He saw, above all, what he himself had never been able to do. One afternoon, hidden behind the half-open door of the gym he had equipped with the most expensive machines on the market, machines his sons had never wanted to use, Edward witnessed a scene that left him speechless. Lucy had Daniel supported by the waist in front of parallel bars. The boy trembled, sweated, gritted his teeth. "I can't," Daniel panted. "Lucy, I can't. I'm falling." "You're not going to fall. I've got you. Look me in the eyes. Look at me. Do you trust me? Yes. Then don't look at the floor. Look at me and take one step. Just one. Any step. I'm not asking for more." And then, clinging to the bars, his legs trembling like leaves, Daniel Sterling moved one foot barely a few inches, a clumsy shuffle on the mat, but a step, the first step in 14 months. "I did it," the boy cried, laughing and crying. "Lucy, I did it. Did you see? Did you see that I did it?" "Of course I saw." Lucy hugged him, and she too was crying, though she tried to hide it. "I told you, your body still listens to you. I told you, you stubborn boy." Behind the door, Edward brought his fist to his mouth, to stifle a sob. The doctors had told him Daniel's recovery would be slow, uncertain, that he might never walk again. And there was his son, taking a step thanks to a woman who had no medical degree, only a heart that refused to give up. That night, Edward couldn't stay silent anymore. He found Lucy in the kitchen, putting away dishes after dinner. She started, seeing him. "Mr. Sterling, excuse me, I'm almost done. I didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me." Edward stood awkwardly, not knowing how to begin. He, who negotiated with financial sharks without blinking, couldn't find the words in front of a 4-year-old girl. "I saw you in the gym," Daniel walked. Lucy lowered her gaze, suddenly nervous. "It wasn't exactly walking, sir. It was a step, but it's a huge advance for him. Your son is very strong, stronger than he himself believes." "Why?" Edward's voice broke. "Why do you do all this? It's not your job. You were hired to clean. No one pays you to give hope back to my sons." Lucy was silent for a moment. Then she looked at him with those green eyes that seemed to see beyond words. "Because I know what it's like to feel like no one cares about you anymore, sir. I know what it's like to be broken inside and for the world to keep turning as if nothing happened." She paused, choosing her words. "Your sons didn't need another doctor. They needed someone to look at them and see people, not patients. That doesn't cost money. It only costs time and willingness." The phrase hit Edward like a slap. Time, the only thing he had never given them. The only thing his money couldn't buy. He swallowed. "I haven't been a good father, Lucy. Since the accident, I didn't know how. Every time I looked at them, I only saw my guilt. I was the one who gave them that car. I bought it for them, and that's why you ran away," Lucy completed gently, without reproach. "I understand. Pain makes people do strange things. Some yell, others leave." But she took a step toward him. "They don't need you to punish yourself. They need you to come back. That's all. Come back. You still have time." Edward felt something break inside him, a dam of 14 months of pent-up pain, and for the first time since the night of the accident, he cried. He cried in front of a cleaner in the kitchen of his own mansion, unashamed, while she placed a hand on his shoulder and let him break down without judgment. From that night on, everything changed. Edward began to stay. He cancelled meetings, delegated trips, sat down to breakfast with his sons for the first time in over a year. At first, the twins treated him with suspicion, with that wounded distance of those who have been abandoned too many times. But Lucy wisely built bridges between them. "Matthew, why don't you teach your dad the card game we invented? I bet you'll beat him. Daniel, tell your dad about yesterday's step. Come on, don't be shy." And little by little, awkwardly, like someone learning to walk again, Edward and his sons began to reconnect. One afternoon, the three of them played cards until midnight. One night, Edward carried Daniel to bed, and the boy, half asleep, murmured, "Good night, Dad," for the first time in 14 months. There were tears, Edward cried, alone out of pure gratitude, and at the center of it all was always Lucy. Edward began to notice things about her that he would have overlooked before. The way she bit her lip when she concentrated, the tenderness with which she treated his sons, the silent dignity with which she bore her poverty without ever complaining, and those green eyes that sometimes clouded with a sadness she quickly hid. One afternoon, he found her crying by the kitchen window, her hand on her belly, in that ancient, painful gesture she thought was secret. "Lucy, are you all right?" She straightened abruptly, wiping her tears. "Yes, sir. Sorry. Just personal things. It's past. You don't have to call me sir all the time." Edward approached. "And you don't have to hide. You've seen me at my worst. Perhaps I can listen to you too." Lucy looked at him, surprised. For an instant, she seemed about to speak, to release the burden she carried, but then she bit her lip and shook her head. "Someday, maybe. Not today, not yet." Edward didn't insist, but something had changed between them. An invisible thread, fragile and dangerous, was beginning to weave itself. He felt it, she did too, and both, scared, pretended not to notice. What neither of them knew was that from the shadow of a hallway, eyes were watching them. Valerie had seen the entire scene. She had seen her brother approach the cleaner, speak to her gently, look at her as he hadn't looked at any woman in years. And on Valerie's perfectly made-up face, a cold, icy smile formed. "So, it's true," she murmured to herself. The great Edward Sterling, infatuated with the maid. She pressed her lips together. "No, little brother, I won't allow that." That same night, Valerie made a phone call. "Franklin, son, I need you to come to the mansion this week. There's a situation we need to resolve as a family." Her voice sweetened with venom. "A cleaner, an opportunist who wants to take what's ours, and you and I are going to make sure that doesn't happen." She hung up the phone and looked out the window at the moonlit garden. Downstairs, she could still hear the family's laughter, the laughter she hated with all her soul. "Enjoy it while you can, little girl," she whispered, "because soon you'll wish you'd never set foot in this house." Franklin Sterling arrived at the mansion on a Thursday afternoon, driving a red sports car that roared up the cobblestone drive like an announcement of trouble. He was 23, his gelled hair slicked back, a bleached white smile that never reached his eyes, and the insufferable confidence of someone who had never had to earn anything. He was Valerie's only son, raised in luxury and indulgence, educated in the idea that the world, and especially his Uncle Edward's fortune, belonged to him by birthright. Big mansion, invalid cousins, giant inheritance, he muttered, getting out of the car and adjusting his dark sunglasses. Home, sweet home. Valerie greeted him at the entrance with an embrace that seemed sincere only for the security cameras. You finally arrived. She took his arm and guided him inside, lowering her voice. Listen carefully, son, because the situation is more serious than I thought. Your uncle has lost his head over a maid, a starving cleaner who arrived 3 months ago, and the boys adore her. If this continues, that social climber will end up in the will. Do you understand what I'm saying? Goodbye inheritance. Goodbye to everything that's rightfully ours. Franklin frowned, suddenly interested. A maid? Seriously, Uncle's chasing a maid. One with a pretty face and a smooth tongue. Those are the worst. They act innocent, self-sacrificing, and before you know it, they've stolen the whole house. Valerie stopped and looked him in the eyes. But we are smarter than her, Franklin. And we are going to get her out of here, by hook or by crook. What neither Valerie nor Franklin knew was that starving maid had something they had never had. The true affection of the family. For the first few days, Franklin tried the most obvious strategy. He approached Lucy with his charming smile and bought charisma, convinced that a poor employee would fall at the feet of a wealthy sterling. So you're the famous Lucy, he said one afternoon, cornering her in the hallway as she carried a stack of sheets. My cousins can't stop talking about you, and honestly, now I understand why. You're much prettier than my mom said. Lucy looked at him unperturbed. Thank you, young mister. Franklin, excuse me, I have to take these. Not so fast. Franklin blocked her path. A girl like you shouldn't be scrubbing floors. I could help you, get you out of here, set you up in a nice apartment. What do you say? You and I could understand each other very well. Lucy calmly placed the sheets on a table and faced him. There was no fear in her eyes, only an ancient weariness, that of someone who had dealt with men like him all her life. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, young man, out of respect for your uncle and cousins, who are good people. But listen carefully, I am not for sale, nor does my dignity have a price. And if you corner me in a hallway again, I swear your uncle will find out what kind of man you are. She walked around him, picked up the sheets, and left with her head held high. Franklin stood rooted, jaw clenched, pride wounded. No one rejected him, no one. And that small but profound humiliation transformed his simple ambition into something much more dangerous, personal resentment. All right, Maid, he muttered, if not the easy way, then the hard way. That night, mother and son met in Valerie's room to refine their plan. The seduction didn't work, Franklin admitted, pouring himself a drink from the minibar. The sanctimonious woman threatened me. Said she'd tell Uncle. I warned you, those are the worst. Valerie paced back and forth, thinking. But it doesn't matter. Seduction was the easy plan. If the girl were as ambitious as the others, she would have fallen by now. The fact that she acts so dignified only means we'll have to use another strategy. Which one? Valerie smiled, and that smile chilled the air in the room. We're going to destroy her reputation. We're going to make your uncle, your cousins, and this entire household hate her so much that they themselves will kick her out. And when she leaves, she'll do so with her head so low she'll never dare to return. And how do you plan to do that? Patience, son. Good things cook slowly. Valerie sat in front of the mirror and began to remove her makeup, speaking to her own reflection. First, the doubts. We have to poison the well, drop by drop. Martha is already half convinced the girl is hiding something. We just need to feed that suspicion. Then the proof. We need something concrete. Something that incriminates her without her being able to defend herself. Franklin looked at her with a mix of admiration and fear. You're terrible, Mom. I'm a mother protecting what's her son's, she corrected coldly. Someday you'll thank me. And so began the silent campaign. It started with small things, objects that disappeared and reappeared in strange places. A broken vase no one had broken, comments expertly sewn. Martha, don't you notice that petty cash has been missing since the new girl arrived? Martha, I could have sworn I saw the girl rummaging in the master's study. Martha, you should keep an eye on her for the family's sake. Martha, who liked Lucy, but had served the Sterlings for 30 years and held a reverential fear of Valerie, began to doubt more and more. She started to discreetly watch Lucy, interpreting every innocent gesture as suspicious. The seed of poison grew. Lucy noticed the change, felt Martha's sidelong glances, the uneasy atmosphere, the new coolness from the housekeeper, who used to treat her almost like a daughter, but she didn't understand why. She attributed everything to her own imagination, to tiredness, to nerves. She would never have imagined a web being woven around her. Meanwhile, her relationship with Edward continued to grow in silence. They shared late coffees in the kitchen when the boys were already asleep, long conversations about life, dreams, pain. Edward discovered in that woman a wisdom and kindness he had never found in the salons of high society. And Lucy, though she fought against it with all her might, discovered that this powerful, wounded man had stolen a piece of her heart she believed shielded forever. One night, their hands brushed as they reached for the same cup. Neither immediately withdrew. They looked at each other. The air was charged with something dense, dangerous, beautiful. "Lucy," Edward began. "Don't say anything, sir." She withdrew her hand, her heart pounding. "Please, whatever you're thinking, it can't be. I'm the cleaner. The world doesn't work like that. The world works however we decide it works. You say that because you've never been poor." Lucy smiled sadly. "Good night, sir." And she left, leaving him alone with his cup of coffee and his confused heart. From the hallway, a shadow had witnessed everything. Valerie smiled in the darkness. The scene confirmed her worst fears and gave her the perfect ammunition. "It's time to speed things up," she told Franklin the next day. "Your uncle is getting more and more smitten. If we wait any longer, the girl will get into the family. We have to strike now." "What strike?" Valerie pulled a small velvet box from her purse and opened it. Inside gleamed an antique, dazzling emerald and diamond necklace. "Eleanor's necklace, my brother's deceased wife, the most valuable jewel in this house, a family heirloom, kept locked in the study safe." Valerie caressed the stones with spider-like fingers. Edward adored it. It was his dead wife's treasure, her most sacred memory. Franklin's eyes widened. "How did you get it out of the safe?" "I've known the combination for years, fool. Why do you think I visit so often?" Valerie put the necklace back. "Tomorrow, this necklace will appear hidden among the belongings of a certain green-eyed cleaner, and when they find it," her smile widened, "no late coffee or tender glance will save her. A thief, that's what she'll be forever. A common thief who took advantage of the family's trust to steal the deceased lady's treasure." Franklin let out a cruel laugh. "Mom, you're an evil genius. I'm practical, son." Valerie closed the box with a snap. "And no one, absolutely no one, stands between my family and what belongs to us." That night, while Lucy slept in her modest room, dreaming for the first time in years of a future she dared to imagine bright, destiny sharpened the knife it was about to plunge into her back. The blow fell on a Saturday morning when the whole household was gathered. Valerie had planned it with surgical precision. She chose the day she knew Edward would be home, when the twins would be having breakfast in the living room, when Martha and the rest of the staff would be nearby. She needed an audience. She needed witnesses. For the humiliation to be perfect, it had to be public. It all began with a shout from Valerie on the second floor. "Edward! Edward! Come quickly! Something's missing from the safe!" Edward ran up the stairs 2 steps at a time, alarmed. He found his sister in front of the open safe in the study, her face distorted in an Oscar-worthy performance. "Eleanor's necklace," Valerie gasped, clutching her chest. "The emerald necklace is gone. I came to get some documents. And Edward, it's not here. It's been stolen." Edward's face paled. That necklace was the only thing he had left of his deceased wife. He had kept it like a sacred, untouchable relic. "That's impossible. Only I know the combination." "Are you sure?" Valerie looked at him with false concern. "Edward, we have to check. We have to search the house. Someone got in here. Someone from inside." And then, as if by chance, her eyes fell on Lucy, who had just come upstairs with a tray to ask if they wanted more coffee. "Let's start with the staff," Valerie said, her voice loaded with insinuation. "For elimination, for everyone's sake." Lucy, not understanding what was happening, placed the tray on the table. "Search. Did something happen, sir?" "A very valuable jewel disappeared," Edward replied, still dazed. "We're going to search the staff rooms. It's protocol. It's nothing personal against anyone." "Of course, sir. I can help you search mine if you want. I have nothing to hide." That calm, that genuine innocence should have been the first sign for Edward. But Valerie didn't give him time to think. "How kind of you to offer yourself, girl," she said, already heading toward the service stairs. "Let's start with yours, then. Go ahead." They all went downstairs. Edward, Valerie, Franklin, with his contained smile, Martha wringing her hands, and Lucy, still unaware of the abyss opening beneath her feet. Even the twins insisted on coming down in their chairs, sensing that something serious was happening. Lucy's room was small, austere, impeccably tidy. A narrow bed, a crucifix on the wall, a faded photo of an older woman, her mother, perhaps on the nightstand, nothing more. The dignified poverty of someone who has nothing but cares for everything. Valerie went straight to the point. Theatrically, she began searching the drawers, the closet, under the bed. "There's nothing here, Aunt," Franklin said, feigning boredom. "What if you check the mattress?" "Good idea, son." Valerie lifted the mattress, and there, between the bed slats, wrapped in a handkerchief, gleamed the emerald and diamond necklace. The silence that followed was deafening. "No," Lucy's voice came out as a thread. That's not mine. I don't know how." "Thief." Valerie exploded, pointing at her with a finger trembling with feigned indignation. "I knew it. I knew this opportunist was hiding something. Look, Edward. Look at Eleanor's necklace, your wife's memory, hidden in your maid's bed." Edward couldn't move. He looked at the necklace in his sister's hands. Then he looked at Lucy, and his world split in two. The woman who had given his sons back to him. The woman with whom he shared late coffees. The woman he now understood with pain he had silently fallen in love with. "A thief, Lucy," he said, and his voice trembled. "Tell me this has an explanation. Tell me." "It's not mine, sir." Tears streamed down her face. "I swear to you, on everything sacred, I never entered that study. I never touched that safe. I don't even know where it is. Someone put it there. Please, believe me." "And who would put it there?" Franklin interjected with calculated coldness. "Are you going to tell us the necklace walked to your mattress by itself? Please, the evidence speaks for itself." "I didn't do it." Lucy fell to her knees, pleading. "Mr. Edward, you know me. You know who I am. Do you really believe I would steal from your wife's memory? I love your sons. I would never." "Shut up, Valeria shrieked. Don't you dare involve the children in your tear-filled act. You're a thief and a manipulator, and finally everyone sees it." And then two voices rose from the back of the room, furious, desperate. "Liar!" It was the twins. "Lucy is no thief," Matthew shouted, propelling his chair forward with such force he almost toppled over. "She would never do that. You're framing her. I don't know how, but you are. She's the only person who's been good to us in this damn year," Daniel added, his face red with rage and tears. "The only one. Dad, don't believe Aunt Valerie. Please, Dad, don't believe her." Edward held his head in his hands. The room spun. The evidence was there, irrefutable, before his eyes. The necklace in the mattress. But his heart screamed that something didn't fit. His instinct, that same instinct that had made him a millionaire, whispered that this was too clean, too convenient, too perfect. "Edward," Valerie hissed, approaching and lowering her voice so only he could hear her. "I know what you feel for her. I've seen it, and that's why I'm telling you as a loving sister. This woman deceived you, softened your heart to rob you. It's an old strategy, as old as humanity. If you don't act now with firmness, you'll look like a ridiculous old man fooled by a maid. Is that what you want? For all of society to laugh at you?" Valerie's words were pure venom and hit their target. Edward's pride, his fear of ridicule, the never-healed wound of betrayal. "But the boys say," Edward murmured. "The boys are affectionate children," Valerie cut in. "Are you going to let two teenagers decide for you? You are the patriarch of this family. Act like one." Edward looked up. He looked at Lucy kneeling, dissolving in tears, pleading. He looked at his sons, shouting in her defense. He looked at the necklace, cold and accusing in his sister's hands. And fear, that old enemy, won the battle. "Lucy," he said in a voice that didn't sound like his own, "I want you to gather your things and leave this house today." The entire living room froze. "Dad, no," Matthew whispered, incredulous. Lucy looked up at Edward, and in her green eyes, drowned in tears, there was no rage, only a pain so deep, so ancient, that it seemed the pain of all the world's injustices concentrated in one person. "All right, sir," she said softly, rising to her feet with a dignity that shook everyone. "I'm leaving, but I want you to know one thing." She looked him directly in the eyes. "I never stole anything from you, neither the necklace nor anything else. The only thing I take from this house is the affection of your sons, and that, sir, that I earned honestly." She picked up the photo of the older woman from the nightstand, pressed it against her chest, and began to put her few belongings into a cloth bag, while the twins cried and called her name. Valerie, standing by the door, hid a triumphant smile. She had won, or so she thought. What happened in the following hours would be seared into the memory of everyone present. Valerie wasn't content with the expulsion. She wanted more. She wanted to destroy Lucy completely. to ensure she never returned, that the humiliation was so absolute that the girl disappeared from their lives forever. And above all, she wanted to poison Lucy's memory so thoroughly that neither the twins nor Edward could ever think of her again without disgust. "Before you go," Valerie said, planting herself in the center of the main living room where they had dragged Lucy to close the matter. "You're going to listen closely to what you are, so you don't dare do this to another decent family." Lucy, with her cloth bag over her shoulder and her mother's photo against her chest, stopped. She lowered her head, not out of submission, but with the dignity of someone who endures a downpour, without lowering herself to the level of the one casting it. "You're a thief," Valerie spat, circling her like a vulture. "An opportunist, a starving woman who came into this house pretending kindness to steal. You approached my disabled nephews to soften their hearts. You got into my widowed brother's kitchen to seduce him, all calculated, all fake. A fourth-rate actress with a pretty face and sticky fingers." Every word was a lash. Martha, in a corner, cried silently, torn between her fearful loyalty and the guilt of knowing something didn't fit. Franklin watched with a cruel, satisfied smile, and Edward stood by the window, his back to the scene, unable to look, his fists clenched, his soul in pieces. "Say something?" Valerie yelled at Lucy. "Defend yourself if you're so innocent." "Ah, no. Of course you can't, because you're guilty." Lucy finally raised her head, and when she spoke, her voice didn't tremble. It came out serene, clear, cutting across the room like a sword. "I could defend myself, ma'am. I could shout, cry, beg, but you already decided who I am before you knew me, and the truth doesn't interest you. You're only interested in winning." She paused. "So I won't give you the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I'm leaving with my head held high because my conscience is clear. And someday, ma'am, the truth will come out. It always does. And that day, I hope your conscience lets you sleep as peacefully as mine lets me sleep." "Insolent!" Valerie raised her hand as if to slap her. "Don't touch her." Daniel's shout stopped Valerie's hand in midair. The boy had propelled his chair to interpose himself between his aunt and Lucy. His face flushed, the veins in his neck bulging, tears streaming down incessantly. "If you touch her," I swear his voice broke. "Lucy taught us to walk again. Lucy gave us back the will to live. And what did you do for us, Aunt? Huh? You never came. You never cared until she showed up. You get out. You're the thief. Daniel." Edward's voice cut the air. "Calm down, please." "I won't calm down." The boy turned to his father, his face a mask of betrayal and pain. "And you're worse than Aunt Valerie. She was at least always a viper. But you let Lucy love us. You let her heal us. And at the first lie, you throw her out like a dog. You're a coward, Dad. A coward." The words pierced Edward like knives. They were the same, almost exact, ones Matthew had screamed at him from his hospital bed 14 months earlier. "You did this to us." History was repeating itself. He was failing them again. He was choosing fear again. "Daniel, enough," Lucy murmured, approaching and putting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Don't talk to your dad like that. He's confused. Anyone would be with what he saw. Don't hate him for this. Promise me." But Lucy promised me. She looked him in the eyes, and then at Matthew. "Both of you, listen carefully, because this is the last thing I'm going to tell you, and I want you never to forget it." She knelt in front of the two wheelchairs, taking a hand from each twin. "You are strong, stronger than you believe. What happened to your legs doesn't define who you are. Keep doing your exercises. Keep fighting, not for me, but for yourselves. And take care of your dad, because he loves you, even if sometimes he doesn't know how to show it. Do you promise me?" The twins, dissolved in tears, nodded. "And one more thing," Lucy added with a trembling smile through her tears. "Never, ever let anyone make you feel like you're worth less for being in a chair. Understood? You're worth the whole world, both of you." She hugged them. A long, heartbreaking goodbye hug. The twins clung to her like shipwrecked people to a plank, sobbing, begging her not to leave. And that image, the two boys crying, clinging to the kneeling cleaner, was so brutally human that even Martha broke into open sobs, and even Franklin had to look away. Only Valerie remained impassive. "Enough with the melodramas," she said coldly. "Let her go, Daniel. She has to leave." Lucy slowly stood up, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, picked up her bag from the floor, and walked toward the exit with her back straight, without turning back, while the twins' shouts echoed behind her. "Lucy, don't go! Lucy, come back, please!" As she reached the door, she stopped for just an instant. She turned her head barely, just enough to look one last time at Edward, who was still by the window, paralyzed, unable to stop her. "Take care, sir," she said softly, "and take care of your sons. They're all you have. Don't waste it." And she left. The oak door closed behind her with a dry thud that echoed in the silence of the living room like the closing of a coffin. Edward stared at that closed door for what seemed an eternity. In his chest grew a horrible, suffocating feeling. The growing certainty that he had just made the worst mistake of his life. "There, it's done," Valerie said, breaking the silence with a poorly disguised sigh of relief. "The nightmare is over. Tomorrow I'll find a new cleaner, one we can trust, and everything will go back to normal, brother." "You'll see." Edward didn't reply. Something in his sister's words, that relief, that haste to return to normalcy, grated on him. He slowly turned and looked at her. He truly looked at her for the first time in a long time. "Why did you have the safe combination, Valerie?" The relief vanished from his sister's face in a blink. "What? What are you saying?" "I didn't," Franklin said. "What if you checked the mattress?" Edward narrowed his eyes, and his strategist's mind began to race. How did he know it was in the mattress? No one had checked the mattress yet. "Edward, for God's sake, don't start. You're hurt, confused." "Yes, I am confused." He took a step toward her. "Confused why? Exactly the day you're here with your son, the only jewel I touch once a year disappears from my safe. Confused why my sons, who know that girl better than anyone, swear on their lives that she's innocent. You're letting 2 children and your feelings cloud your judgment." Valerie shrieked, but panic was already showing in her eyes. The evidence. Edward. The necklace was in her room. Matthew, from his chair, had stopped crying. Something had ignited in his gaze. An idea, a cold, lucid fury, very different from the desperate anger of minutes before. "Dad," he said softly, almost trembling with adrenaline. "The cameras." Edward turned to his son. "What?" "The security cameras." Matthew clenched his fists on the wheels of his chair. "There's one in the study hallway. You put it in yourself after the accident to watch the night nurses. If someone took the necklace from the safe," the boy stared at his aunt. "It's all recorded." The entire living room held its breath. Valerie turned white as paper. "Those cameras don't work," she stammered. "They've been broken for months." "Someone told me they work perfectly," Edward said slowly, without taking his eyes off his sister, as an icy rage rose from his stomach. "I checked them last week, and for the first time all morning, it was Valerie Sterling who began to tremble. Let's go to the security room now." Edward's voice allowed no argument. It was the voice of the man who bent entire boards of directors to his will, the voice that hadn't been heard in that house for 14 months. "Edward, this is ridiculous," Valerie protested, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Are you going to doubt my word for a blurry recording, your own sister for a maid? If you're so sure of your innocence," Edward replied without looking at her, "then you have nothing to fear. Let's go." Matthew and Daniel were already rolling toward the security room located next to the study. Franklin, who until then had smiled smugly, had lost color in his face and was looking for the nearest exit. "Mom," he murmured. "Mom, what do we do?" "Shut up," Valerie hissed through clenched teeth. "Don't say absolutely anything. Not a word. Understood?" The security room was small, full of monitors. Edward sat in front of the console and began to manipulate the system with quick, precise fingers. Martha also entered, drawn by the commotion, wiping her tears with her apron. Everyone huddled around the main screen. "The safe was last opened 3 days ago," Edward murmured, checking the system logs. "I didn't open it. I haven't touched that safe in months." He typed in the date. "Let's see who did." The recording began to play. The black and white image, perfectly clear, showed the study hallway in the dead of night. For a few seconds, nothing happened, just the empty hallway, the system clock ticking 2:47 a.m., and then a figure entered the frame, an elegant woman in a silk robe, furtively looking both ways before slipping inside the study. Valerie. The entire room held its breath. On the screen, Valerie opened the safe, dialing the combination with complete familiarity. She took out the velvet case, extracted the emerald necklace, and put it in her robe pocket. With a satisfied smile the camera captured with cruel clarity. "No," Martha whispered, bringing her hands to her mouth. My God, ma'am, what did you do?" The recording continued. Another scene, another date, the morning before the discovery. This time, Franklin was seen sneaking into the staff room with the case in his hand, and leaving minutes later with empty hands. The evidence was absolute, irrefutable, recorded in high definition. Edward stared at the screen in sepulchral silence. When he finally turned to his sister, his face was a stone mask, but in his eyes burned a fire Valerie had never seen. 14 months. he said with terrifying calm. 14 months, that woman gave my sons their lives back. And you accused her, humiliated her, threw her out of my house like a criminal. You used the memory of my dead wife to destroy the only person who did us good. Edward, listen to me. I can explain it. Valerie backed away. I did it for you, for the family. That woman would have really robbed you sooner or later. I just got ahead of her. You did it for the family? Edward stood from his chair, and his voice rose thunderously for the first time. The family are them. He pointed to his sons. My sons who cried, begging me not to throw her out while you applauded. You did it for money, Valerie, for the inheritance. You've been circling this house like a vulture for years, waiting for us to die so you could take everything. That's not true. Franklin said it the first day. Daniel shouted from his chair. I heard him. When he arrived, he told a friend on the phone that he was coming to secure the inheritance. He thought I was asleep in the garden, but I heard everything. Franklin turned white. That's a lie, cousin. You're making it up. Enough. Edward raised a hand, and silence fell abruptly. He took out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer and the police. Theft of a family jewel, slander, false accusation, and believe me, Valerie, I'm going to use every penny of the fortune you covet so much to make sure you answer for this before the law. You wouldn't dare. I'm your sister. The scandal would ruin all of us. You should have thought of that before destroying an innocent person. Edward dialed a number. Now, gather your things and your sons, and get out of my house before the police arrive. I never want to see you again. You are dead to me, Valerie. You and your greed. Valerie opened her mouth to retort, but for once in her life, she found no words. She looked around, searching for an ally, and found only contempt. Martha's tear-filled eyes, the twins' fury, her brother's lethal coldness. She had lost. And worst of all, she had betrayed herself with her haste, her cruelty, her arrogance. She grabbed Franklin's arm, and with her chin still raised in a final gesture of wounded pride, she left the security room. Minutes later, the roar of the red sports car faded down the cobblestone drive, this time not to return. When the sound of the engine was lost in the distance, a new silence fell over the house. A different silence, not the silence of mourning, but of the weight of newly revealed truth. Edward sank into a chair and covered his face with his hands. What have I done? He murmured. My God, what have I done? I threw her out. I treated her like a criminal. I believed Valerie instead of believing her, instead of believing you. Matthew rolled his chair to his father's side, and after a moment of hesitation, placed a hand on his arm. You still have time, Dad. His voice no longer held resentment, only a hopeful urgency. Lucy said the truth always comes out, and it did, but it's useless if we let her go. Go for her, Dad, Daniel added. Please, find her, bring her back, fix it. Edward lifted his head, looking at his two sons. These boys who, despite all the pain he had caused them, still believed in him, still asked him to do the right thing. And something straightened within his chest, a backbone that had been broken for 14 months. You're right. He stood up abruptly. Martha, do you know where Lucy lives? Do you have her address? Any information? Anything? Martha, who had not stopped crying, nodded frantically. In her file, sir. In the office. She lives in an apartment complex in the Southside neighborhood. But, sir, she hesitated, that girl is proud, and we hurt her very badly. She might not want to come back. I have to try. Edward was already putting on his jacket. I owe her an apology, even if she rejects me. I owe her the truth, even if she closes the door in my face. He looked at his sons. I owe her everything, and I've already wasted too much time silencing what I feel. Matthew and Daniel exchanged a knowing glance, and for the first time that terrible day, they smiled. So what are you waiting for, Dad? Matthew said. Go. Edward took his car keys, his heart beating as it hadn't since his youth, and rushed out of the mansion into the golden light of dusk. As he drove south toward the modest neighborhoods he had never set foot in, a single question tormented him. Would he arrive in time, or would Lucy, hurt and humiliated, have already disappeared from his life forever? He pressed the accelerator. He wasn't giving up, not this time. The Southside neighborhood was another world. Edward Sterling, accustomed to tree-lined avenues and wrought-iron gates, drove his luxury car down narrow, dusty streets, where children played soccer in puddles, where clothes dried hanging between windows, where people looked at him with curiosity as a vehicle worth more than all the houses on the block combined passed by. He stopped in front of the apartment complex Martha had indicated, an old, two-story building with a central courtyard where a dry fountain accumulated leaves, surrounded by numbered doors. He got out of the car, feeling completely out of place for the first time in his life. "I'm looking for Lucy Miller," he asked an older woman who was hanging clothes in the courtyard. The woman measured him from head to toe with distrust. "And who are you?" "I'm Edward," he hesitated. "I'm someone who owes her a very big apology." Something in his tone, in his distressed gaze, must have softened the woman. "Apartment 6, in the back, but she just got back, and she was very upset, crying, 'Poor thing, treat her well, or you'll have me to deal with.'" Edward crossed the courtyard with his heart in his throat. In front of door number 6, he stopped, took a deep breath, and knocked. There was a silence, then footsteps. The door opened barely, and through the crack appeared Lucy's face, her eyes swollen from crying. Seeing him, her expression shifted from bewilderment to pain. "Mr. Sterling," her voice was barely a thread. "What are you doing here? If you came to retrieve something else, I swear I have nothing of yours. I never did." "I know," Edward swallowed. "Lucy, I know everything. The cameras, the video. I saw Valerie take the necklace from the safe. I saw Franklin hide it in your room. I saw everything. You are innocent. You always were." Lucy stood very still. She opened the door a little wider, and then the tears she had been holding back overflowed again, but this time they were different. Tears of relief, of vindication, of an enormous weight finally lightening. "You saw it?" she whispered. "You really saw it?" "I saw it, and I threw Valerie and Franklin out of my house, and I'm going to report them." And his voice broke. "And I came to ask for your forgiveness, although I know I don't deserve it. I failed you, Lucy, just as I failed my sons. I chose fear instead of truth. I chose my pride instead of believing you. And there's no apology in the world that can repair what I put you through this morning." Lucy opened the door completely. Her room was tiny. A bed, a table, a single-burner stove, her mother's photo now placed on a rickety piece of furniture, absolute poverty, yet impeccably clean, dignified, lovingly cared for. "Come in," she said softly. "It's not much, but come in." Edward entered, ducking his head under the low doorway. He sat on the only chair she offered him, and for a moment, neither of them knew what to say. "Why?" Lucy finally asked. "Why did you believe her?" I thought you knew me after all those nights talking in the kitchen. I thought you knew who I was." "And I did." Edward brought his hands to his face. "My heart knew it, but my fear screamed louder. Valerie told me that all of society would laugh at me, an old widower fooled by his employee. And I let that idiotic fear outweigh all the good I had seen in you. I'm a coward, Lucy. My son yelled it at me this morning, and he was right." Lucy sat on the edge of the bed opposite him. She looked at him with those green eyes that had so captivated him. "You're not a coward," she said softly. "You're a broken man who made a bad decision out of fear. I understand that more than you think." She paused, her gaze lost in her mother's photo. "Remember I told you that someday I would tell you my story? I think that day has come, so you can understand why I could love your son so much." Edward nodded in silence. Lucy took a deep breath, and for the first time opened the wound she carried deep inside. "I had a son 4 years ago." Her voice trembled. "My name is Lucy Miller, and I was a mother for exactly 7 months. My baby was named Thomas. He was born with a heart problem. The doctors said there was nothing to do, that it was a matter of time, but I didn't give up. I cared for him day and night. I made up songs for him, did exercises the nurses taught me, talked to him as if he would live 100 years. Tears streamed down her face, and still he was gone. One winter morning, he left me in my arms, and with him went everything I was." Edward felt the air escape his chest. He finally understood the gesture of her hand on her belly, the ancient sadness in her eyes, the infinite patience with 2 boys the world had given up on. "His father left before Thomas was born," Lucy continued. "I was left alone, without money, without family other than my mother, who also died shortly after. I was about to let myself die too, but one day I understood something. All that love I had for my son had nowhere to go, and maybe somewhere in the world there was someone who needed exactly that, who needed someone not to give up on them." She looked up. "And then I came to your house and met Matthew and Daniel, 2 boys everyone had given up on, 2 boys as broken as I was. And I knew from the first day that heaven had put them in my path, that the love I couldn't give Thomas, I could give to them." The silence that followed was sacred. Edward rose from the chair, knelt in front of Lucy, took her hands, those hands that had healed his sons, those hands he had accused of stealing, and pressed them against his forehead. "Forgive me," he murmured, his voice broken. "Forgive me, Lucy, not for today's apology. Forgive me for not having seen the extraordinary woman in front of me sooner, for not having understood the gift you were to my family, for everything. Please, Get up, sir. Lucy tried to withdraw her hands, moved. You don't have to kneel before me. Yes, I do. Edward lifted his head, and his eyes were also filled with tears. And I'm going to do something else. I'm going to ask you to come back, not as a cleaner. My sons don't want an employee, Lucy. They want you. And he took a breath, risking everything. I want you too. I've been feeling it for weeks and keeping it quiet out of cowardice, but no more. I love you, Lucy Miller. With your past, with your pain, with your yellow gloves and your green eyes. I love you. Lucy was speechless. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. It was impossible, ridiculous. The millionaire and the cleaner. The world didn't work like that. And yet, there was that man, kneeling in her miserable room, offering her his heart with a sincerity that admitted no doubt. Mr. Edward, she whispered. This isn't that easy. There's so much distance between you and me. People would talk. And I don't want you to come back out of pity, or guilt, or come back for my sons, he interrupted gently. Come back for them, who need you and adore you. And give me time to show you that the rest isn't guilt or pity. It's the truth, the greatest truth I've felt in years. I only ask for one chance, just one. Lucy looked into those pleading eyes. She looked at her mother's photo. She thought of Thomas. She thought of Matthew and Daniel crying, clinging to her that morning. And she felt that perhaps after so much pain, life was offering her a second chance she hadn't dared to dream of. All right, she finally said with a trembling smile through her tears. I'll come back for the boys. And she blushed. And I'll give you a chance, sir, just one. Edward smiled as he hadn't smiled in years. And through the window of the small room, the last ray of sunset illuminated them both, kneeling before each other, like two broken souls who had finally found each other. Lucy's return to the mansion was like the return of spring to a house that had been in winter for too long. When Edward's car drove through the wrought iron gates that night, the twins were already waiting on the porch, their wheelchairs aligned under the golden light of the lamps, their faces pressed against the window even before the vehicle stopped. And when Lucy got out with her cloth bag, her eyes still swollen but bright with new hope, Matthew and Daniel burst into shouts of joy. She's back! Lucy's back! They rolled toward her so fast they almost collided, and Lucy knelt on the ground to hug them both at the same time, laughing and crying, while they clung to her neck as if fearing she would disappear again. Never again, do you hear me? She told them between laughs and tears. This time I'm not leaving, I promise you. We swear it too, Daniel replied, his voice muffled against her shoulder. If anyone tries to throw you out again, they'll have to go over our chairs first. Martha on the doorstep cried openly. When Lucy saw her, there was a moment of tension. The housekeeper had remained silent, had doubted, had allowed the slander to grow, but Martha approached with her head bowed and trembling hands. Child, I can't even face you to apologize. I doubted you. I let that woman poison my mind. If you allow me, I will spend the rest of my days trying to make it up to you. And if you don't allow me, I will understand that too. Lucy took her hands. Martha, you were also a victim of Valerie. She deceived us all. I hold no grudge. Let's start anew. Yes, both of us. And Martha, overcome with gratitude, hugged her like the daughter she never had. The days that followed were the brightest that house had known in years. Lucy was no longer the cleaner. At Edward's and the twins' insistence, she moved into one of the guest rooms, and her role in the family transformed completely. She continued to organize therapies, games, morning songs, but now she had breakfast with them at the main table, participated in household decisions, and in the evenings, when the boys were asleep, she sat with Edward on the terrace, talking under the stars. The love between them grew slowly, with the prudence of two people who had already suffered too much. Edward didn't pressure her. He gave her time, space, small gestures, a flower picked from the garden, a book he knew she would like, the patience to listen to her talk about Thomas without looking away, and Lucy slowly let down the walls she had built around her broken heart. One night on the terrace, Edward took her hand. This time she didn't withdraw it. Lucy, he said, I know you said you'd give me a chance, and I don't want to rush you, but I need you to know that this isn't a whim for me. I want a future with you and with my sons, a real family. Lucy looked at him, and her green eyes reflected the moonlight. I lost a family, Edward. I lost my son, my mother, everything. For years I thought I had nothing left to give. She squeezed his hand. But you three gave me back the will to believe. And yes, I also want a future with you with fear, because life taught me to have it. But I want it. Edward leaned in, and with infinite tenderness, he kissed her for the first time. A gentle kiss, full of promises, of wounds beginning to heal, of two souls who had crossed the desert of pain to find each other on the other side. Meanwhile, the twins' progress was astounding. With Lucy back, and with the newfound support of their father, who now attended every therapy session, learned the exercises, celebrated every small achievement, Matthew and Daniel flourished. Daniel was already taking several steps with the parallel bars. Matthew, the more consistent, was beginning to stand for a few seconds without support. The doctors, previously pessimistic, now spoke of a recovery they described as extraordinary. But Edward and Lucy knew the truth. It wasn't a medical miracle. It was love. It was not giving up. It was exactly what Lucy had done with her son Thomas, multiplied by 2. But happiness in great stories never comes without a final test. One afternoon, while Lucy was arranging flowers in the foyer, the doorbell rang. Martha opened it, and as she did, her face fell. It was Valerie, but not the haughty Valerie of before. This one was haggard, with deep circles under her eyes, smudged makeup, dressed in worn elegance that betrayed her new reality. Edward's complaint had progressed. The family's lawyers, relentless, had frozen the accounts she shared with her brother. They had seized the properties that were in the Sterling family name, and a criminal prosecution hung over her head. Franklin had fled abroad to avoid prison. Valerie had lost almost everything, and now she was there, on the threshold, looking at Lucy with a hatred that not even defeat had managed to extinguish. "You," she hissed, "you destroyed me. You took everything from me, my family, my fortune, my son who had to flee because of you." Lucy put down the flowers and faced her calmly. "I didn't take anything from you, ma'am. You destroyed yourself. I just cleaned floors and loved 2 boys who needed it. Don't play the saint with me." Valerie stepped forward, and from her purse she pulled something that made Martha scream. A small vial of clear liquid. "Do you know what this is? Acid. If I can't have the life I deserve, that pretty doll face of yours isn't going to have it either. Let's see if my brother still loves you when he sees you disfigured." Time seemed to stop. Valerie raised her arm, but before she could throw the contents of the vial, a voice thundered from the top of the stairs. "Let go, Valerie." It was Matthew. And the impossible happened. The boy, clinging to the banister with both hands, had stood up, trembling, sweating, his legs about to give out, but standing, and with a desperate impulse, he descended 2 wobbly steps and launched himself forward with the full weight of his body, grabbing his aunt's arm just in time, deflecting the vial, which fell to the marble floor and shattered far from Lucy, the drops of acid hissing against the stone without touching anyone. "Matthew," Lucy cried, running to support him before he fell. Edward, who had heard the commotion, ran down the stairs and lunged at his sister, holding her tightly, while Martha screamed for the police. Valerie struggled, yelling incoherent things, completely out of her mind, until she finally collapsed on the floor, defeated, sobbing a mix of rage and madness. "It's over, Valerie," Edward gasped, holding her. "This time there's no video that will save you. You just tried to assault Lucy in front of 5 witnesses. You're going to jail, and this time not all the money in the world will get you out." Minutes later, police sirens filled the cobblestone drive. Valerie was handcuffed and put into a patrol car, yelling threats that no longer scared anyone, until the doors closed and the vehicle took her away forever. In the foyer, amidst the broken glass and pounding hearts, the family embraced. Lucy held Matthew, who trembled from the superhuman effort he had just made. "You stood up," Lucy whispered, crying. "Matthew, you stood up. You walked for me. I told you they'd have to go over my chair," the boy replied with an exhausted smile. "And it turns out I didn't even need it anymore." Edward wrapped his arms around all of them. Daniel joined them from his chair, and the 4 of them, finally, without threats, without shadows, without lies, formed something none of them had had in a long time, a family. "The storms are over," Edward murmured, kissing Lucy's forehead. "I promise you, from today on, only good things await us." And for once, it was a promise he could keep. A year later, the garden of Sterling Manor awoke transformed into a dream. Hundreds of white roses adorned the arches. Tables dressed in impeccable linen lined up under a translucent silk tent, and the golden morning light filtered through the trees like a blessing. The marble fountain, once a symbol of the house's cold silence, now sang with water and was surrounded by petals. Everything was ready for the wedding of Edward Sterling and Lucy Miller. In her room, in front of the mirror, Lucy contemplated herself, still unable to fully believe it. The simple, elegant white dress, which she herself had chosen, rejecting the extravagant designs Edward wanted to give her, fell with natural grace. Her hair was pulled back with small flowers, and around her neck hung a delicate chain from which dangled a tiny photo, that of her son Thomas, and next to it, one of her mother. So they would be present, so they would accompany her on the happiest day of her life. "Ready, dear?" Martha entered, her eyes already teary, smoothing her veil with hands trembling with emotion. "You look beautiful, like a princess. Your mother would be so proud." "Thank you, Martha." Lucy hugged her for everything, for staying, for becoming family. Go on, you'll make me cry prematurely, and my mascara will run." Martha wiped her eyes. "There are 2 young men out there who have been asking for half an hour if you're almost ready." Lucy smiled and took a deep breath. It was time. When she walked out into the garden, a murmur of admiration went through the guests. But Lucy only had eyes for the improvised altar at the end of the petal aisle, where Edward waited for her in an impeccable suit and a smile that lit up his entire face, and by his side, flanking him like 2 honor guards, stood Matthew and Daniel, the twins, whom doctors had given up on 14 months earlier, who had spent over a year confined to their wheelchairs and bitterness, now waited for Lucy standing, each subtly supported by an elegant cane, in tailored suits, with pride overflowing from their eyes. They had worked for months with titanic effort to achieve exactly that, to receive Lucy walking on their wedding day. It was their gift, the greatest gift they could give to the woman who had given them back their lives. Lucy stopped halfway down the aisle, bringing her hands to her mouth, unable to hold back her tears. "Come on, Lucy." Matthew encouraged her loudly with a mischievous smile. "Or do you want us to come for you? Because we can now, you know." Laughter and applause erupted among the guests. Lucy, laughing and crying at the same time, walked toward the altar. And since she had no father to give her away, it was the twins who, each taking one of her arms, led her the last steps to Edward in the most moving gesture that Garden had ever witnessed. "Take good care of her, Dad," Daniel said, placing Lucy's hand in his father's. "Because if you don't, you know, we can chase you now." Edward laughed, his eyes bright with tears, and squeezed Lucy's hand in his. There are no words," he murmured. "I've spent my whole life looking for the right words for everything, and today I can't find any that do you justice." "You don't need them," she replied softly. "Your eyes say it all." The ceremony was simple and deeply emotional. When it came time for the vows, Edward took a breath and spoke from the depths of his heart. "Lucy, 2 years ago I was a man dead inside. I had lost my wife, I had pushed my sons away, and I had locked myself in a fortress of money and loneliness. You came to my house in a blue uniform and yellow gloves, and without asking permission, without asking for anything in return, you gave life back to the 3 of us. You taught me that wealth isn't in what you have, but in who you have. Today I promise that I will spend the rest of my days trying to deserve the miracle that you are. I love you, and I love the family we've formed." Lucy, her voice breaking, replied, "Edward, I thought life had already taken everything it could give from me. I thought my heart was too broken to love again. But you 3 showed me that love doesn't end. It just changes form, it transforms, it finds new paths. You gave me back faith, Matthew and Daniel gave me back joy. And today, in front of everyone, I promise to love all 3 of you with all that I am, forever. I'm no longer afraid, finally. I'm no longer afraid." When the officiant declared them husband and wife and Edward kissed Lucy, the entire garden rose to its feet in an ovation. Matthew and Daniel, leaning on their canes, shouted and applauded louder than anyone. Martha wept openly in the front row, and among the white roses and golden light, a new family was officially born, forged not by blood or money, but by something much stronger. Love that heals, that forgives, that refuses to give up. The following months were pure happiness. Lucy and Edward finally traveled, not for business, but for pleasure. All 4 together, seeing the ocean the twins had never seen, the mountains, cities full of life. Matthew and Daniel continued to improve. By their first wedding anniversary, both were walking almost without canes, and Daniel spoke of studying medicine to help others, like Lucy helped me. Matthew, for his part, had discovered a passion for photography and filled the house with portraits of his reunited family. As for Valerie, she was convicted of theft, slander, and attempted assault. She would spend several years in prison, alone, abandoned even by her own son. Her greed, which had sought to take everything from the Sterling family, ended up taking everything from herself. Justice, slow but certain, had spoken. And then, a year and a half after the wedding, came the greatest joy of all. One morning, Lucy gathered the 3 men in her life in the living room. The same living room where years earlier Edward had discovered her kneeling amidst his son's laughter. and with a smile that trembled on her lips, and a hand on her belly in that gesture that was no longer of pain, but of hope, she announced, "We're going to have a baby." Matthew and Daniel's shouts of joy could be heard in the street. Edward hugged Lucy and lifted her into his arms, laughing and crying. Martha, who came running at the commotion, collapsed into a chair from pure emotion. Months later, a baby girl was born. They named her Hope, because that was exactly what that family had learned through pain and love. That hope never dies, that after the darkest night, dawn always breaks, and that broken souls, when they find each other, can become whole again. Little Hope grew up surrounded by love, 2 older brothers who adored her and who now walked by her side, a father who never again put work before his family, a surrogate grandmother, Martha, who spoiled her relentlessly, and a mother whose green eyes had finally left sadness behind to be filled only with light. And sometimes on golden afternoons, Lucy would sit on the terrace, contemplating her family, Edward reading a story to the little girl, Matthew photographing them all, Daniel chasing his little sister around the garden with the legs he once thought lost, and she would bring her hand to her chest where Thomas's photo hung and smile up at the sky. "Look, my love," she would whisper, "all that love I had for you. Look where it went. Look at the family we built. You taught me not to give up, and I never did." The wind rustled the white roses, the fountain sang, and Stirling Manor, which for so long had been the coldest place in the world, had finally become what it always should have been, a home. 5 years later, Stirling Manor was unrecognizable to anyone who had known it in its days of silence and mourning. Where before reigned the coldness of empty hallways, now ran the laughter of a little girl. Where before only the solitary footsteps of a widower locked in his study were heard, now resonated voices, music, the warm bustle of a truly alive home. Little Hope was now 4 years old. She was a girl with brown hair and green eyes, identical to her mother's, mischievous and radiant, who ran through the gardens, chasing butterflies and demanding that her older brothers carry her on their shoulders. And they, Matthew and Daniel, now grown men of 23, always indulged her. Because that girl was for everyone, the living symbol of everything they had overcome. Because the twins walked without canes, without chairs, without help. They ran through the garden after their little sister, went up the stairs 2 steps at a time, played soccer on Sundays with their father. What doctors had declared impossible had become every day, and almost no one remembered the 14 dark months when those 2 boys had wanted to die. Almost no one, except themselves, who never forgot the person who refused to give up when everyone else already had. Daniel fulfilled his dream. He studied medicine at the country's best university, specializing in physical rehabilitation. "I want to do for others what Lucy did for me," he would always repeat when asked about his vocation. In his hospital practice, he treated every patient in a wheelchair, not as a medical case, but as a person. He would sit on the floor beside them, talk to them as equals, tell them that phrase he had learned from his adoptive mother, "Your job isn't to walk tomorrow. Your job is not to give up today." And the moved patients found in that young doctor a hope that no treatment could give them. Matthew, for his part, had become a renowned photographer. His first exhibition, titled Standing Tall, a series of portraits of people who had overcome the impossible, toured galleries in several cities and moved thousands. The central photograph of the exhibition, the one all critics highlighted, was a black and white image of hands, the hands of a woman in yellow gloves, holding those of a young man standing for the first time. Below, a single line, "The love that doesn't give up," and at the center of it all, as always, was Lucy. She was no longer the scared cleaner who had crossed the gates with $100 in her pocket. She was Mrs. Stirling, yes, but she never let the luxuries go to her head. She still woke up early, still made up songs to wake her daughter. She still treated Martha and the rest of the household staff as equals, as family. With Edward's support, she had founded something that gave meaning to all her past pain, the Thomas Foundation. In honor of her lost son, a free center for rehabilitation and support for low-income children and young people with disabilities. "I want no child to feel given up on," she had told Edward when she proposed the idea. "I want no mother to have to care for her sick child alone. I want the love I had for Thomas, and the love I had for the boys to reach whoever needs it, not to stay locked up here in this house." Edward, who had finally learned that true wealth was that, funded the foundation without hesitation. And the Thomas Foundation became a beacon of hope for hundreds of families who, like Lucy years ago, had nowhere to turn. One Sunday afternoon, the whole family gathered in the garden under the same tree where years ago their wedding had been celebrated. Edward lit the grill. Daniel and Matthew played with little Hope. Martha, now elderly but happier than ever, prepared lemonade, and Lucy watched them all from the terrace with a cup of coffee in her hands, feeling her chest full of a peace no money in the world could buy. Edward approached from behind and hugged her, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange destiny is," she replied. "Years ago, I arrived at this house broken into 1,000 pieces, convinced that life had nothing good left for me, and look at me now," she smiled. "Sometimes I think of that scared girl in apartment 6 of the complex, and I wish I could tell her, hold on a little longer, because what's coming is worth all the wait." "If you could go back," Edward said, "would you change anything? The pain, the losses, the day I threw you out of this house." Lucy thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, not a single thing, because every wound, every tear, every injustice brought me exactly here, to you all. And if I had to go through all the pain in the world again to get to this garden, to this Sunday, to this family, I would do it again without thinking." Edward kissed her temple. "I love you, Lucy Sterling, and I love you, all 4 of you." At that moment, little Hope came running with a white flower plucked from the garden and held it out to her mother with the solemnity of children. "Mommy, look what I brought you." Lucy knelt to be at her height, the exact same gesture with which years ago she had received 2 boys in wheelchairs, and took the flower with a smile. "It's beautiful, my love. Thank you." "Why do you always start crying when you're happy?" the girl asked, confused to see her mother's eyes wet. Lucy laughed through tears and hugged her. "Because sometimes, my dear, the heart gets so full of good things that it overflows through the eyes. Someday you'll understand." Matthew, who had witnessed everything, raised his camera and captured the moment. Lucy kneeling, embracing her daughter with the golden light of sunset enveloping them both. Later, that photograph would occupy a place of honor in the main living room, just above the fireplace. And below, Matthew engraved a plaque with the words his adoptive mother had repeated so many times. The words that had saved an entire family. "Wounds heal if someone has the patience not to give up." That night, when the children were asleep and the house fell silent, a good silence, a silence of peace, Edward and Lucy went out to the terrace, as on so many other nights, to gaze at the stars. "Do you know what I think sometimes?" Lucy said. "That my mother and my little Thomas are watching us from somewhere, and that they are at peace because they know that the love they planted in me was not lost, that it bore fruit, that it continues to bear fruit in every child at the foundation, in every patient of Daniel, in every photo of Matthew, in every laugh of Hope." "I'm sure that's true," Edward replied, taking her hand. "You turned the greatest pain into the greatest love, and not many people are capable of that, Lucy. In fact, I don't know anyone else." She rested her head on his shoulder. Above them, the sky stretched vast and star-studded, and Sterling Manor slept warm and happy behind them. The story of the green-eyed cleaner, the woman who arrived with yellow gloves to heal 2 broken hearts and ended up healing an entire family, would be told for years in that neighborhood, in that city, as stories people need to believe are told those that prove that goodness, though sometimes slow, always wins. That truth, though buried, always comes to light. And that true love, the kind that never gives up, is capable of working the greatest miracles. Because sometimes, destiny doesn't arrive in a golden carriage or with a stroke of luck. Sometimes destiny arrives kneeling in a living room with a blue uniform, yellow gloves, and a heart wide open, and it changes everything. The end.